I'd like to call to order the Harwich Planning Board, excuse me, located at Town Hall, 732 Main Street, Harwich. This is Tuesday, January 24th, 2023, 6:31 PM. And the meeting of the planning board will be held in person and may be available as a live broadcast on Channel 18. Members of the public with an interest in any portion or specific item on the agenda should plan for an in-person attendance. Anybody intending to record? That's a no. Okay, if you would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Since we have a remote member, let's do a roll call. Dave, I assume that's you? Dave Harris, can you hear me? Dave? Muted. Can you hear us? Are you muted? Well, he's playing. How about Ann?
Ann Clark Tucker here.
Emily?
Emily Brady, present.
Yeah.
Mary Maslowski, present.
Bill Stoltz, present.
Do I do roll call?
Yeah.
Harry Munn's present.
And Craig Chadwick, present. The first case we have is a
Check with that with David.
I'm sorry?
To David.
Oh, that's right, David, I'm sorry. David, are you on? Can you hear us?
You're muted, David.
Control in the middle bottom, wave the mouse around there, unmute usually.
Oh, we can hear something. Dave?
I can read lips, he said present.
He did.
Just teasing.
Can you see me? I don't know.
I gotta get it real
Well, one more time, Dave. He's trying to speak, it looks like.
Somehow you're gonna find the mute button, Dave, there's a,
Oh,
oh, yeah, maybe.
Give the dial back in. Just give
I
him a
think he
moment.
uses his phone for his hearing aids and,
I don't know, I would give him a moment to
Yeah.
dial back in.
No hurry.
or did he give up on us?
Can we text him?
Planning board images mirrored there, huh?
Pardon me?
The planning board, it's mirrored somehow, the images.
Yeah, and that's why I was standing up trying to make him, if he, oh,
There
there
we
he
go.
is.
There he is.
Dave, can you hear us?
I wonder if we have the speaker up now.
Dave?
Deja vu of 2 years of pandemic.
David, can you hear us at all?
Technical
If you can, nod.
difficulties at every meeting.
People, go
He can hear us.
here.
So you're muted somehow, you have to wiggle your mouse around until you can find the microphone and hit unmute.
Does it go to meeting?
Can't see that. He's typing something.
Was that stars?
What's it say in the bottom? I can't read.
So,
Right.
Star six.
David, it looks like you've signed up for your phone to be your voice. So if you're not doing that, you have to change it to computer audio in your settings.
Can you read the first box?
Is he typing that?
Yeah.
I think that was Channel 18 typing.
Oh,
David, I don't know.
How does this
there-
lot get
there's some
frontage?
sound. Dave?
So, there's none over here, is there?
They've got, these provisions for what they call
Oh, that's us.
and, the frontage can be reduced under certain circumstances.
People over the microphone. There you go.
Well, should we get
David, David, if you can hear me, if you wiggle your mouse around, you want to change your audio to your computer audio instead of your phone audio. Or you need to dial in, one or the other, but we still can't hear you.
Can you hear us, Dave? Not if you can hear us.
I think he's gonna try and.
He can. We can't hear you.
Dave, if you can see the chat, they're trying to, Channel 18 is trying to tell you you can dial in with your telephone, and they're giving you a telephone number that you can call in so that we can hear you on the telephone.
That's good eyes.
You got a cell number, just give them a call.
Because we don't have the phone set up.
Oh, yeah. There it is.
Hello,
Hello.
There you are. Hello, David.
this is, that's the third time I've dialed in.
3 times the charm.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to slow things down.
Okay. Well, we were just taking roll call, so you are here. State your name, please.
David Harris,
Thank you.
semi-present.
Thank you. We're happy you're present. Okay, our first order of business tonight is a continuation, a public hearing, a continuation from November 22nd, 2022, PB 2022-23, Christopher Auer Hybrid Build Homes, LLC, Janet Shea Auer, Brian Blanchard, and Scott Owen Auer as owners. The applicant seeks approval of a 7-lot definitive subdivision plan with waivers and a panhandle lot. The application is pursuant to the Code of Town of Harwich, C 400, Article 2, and MGL, Chapter 41, Section 81K through GG. The property is located off Littlefield Pond Road, map 77, parcel C20-11, Littlefield Pond Road, and includes map 77, parcel C22, 0 Littlefield Pond Road, a portion of map 77, parcel C23, 0 Littlefield Pond Road, map 65, parcels R2, 103 Old Harwich Brewster Road, and map 65, parcel R3, 105 Harwich Brewster Road. The parcels are in the RR and WR zoning district. And would we like,
Yes,
bring us up to date since our continued meeting?
be happy to. Chairman, members of the Planning Board, my name is Dan Ojala. I'm a land surveyor and civil engineer with Down Cape Engineering in Yarmouthport, and helping the Hours and Mr. Giarusso out with a redivision of some property and a subdivision off of Littlefield Pond Road and Fishing Game Drive in Harwich. As you may recall, we had a nice, healthy and lengthy discussion with the board and the neighbors at the last meeting. There were, just prior to the meeting, some comments from engineering. VHB had reviewed the plans and was generally a nice favorable review over the bits and pieces, but there were a couple of things that were requested to be changed, and so I'll just go over those briefly. And then they did, staff thought better that because there was a question of whether the centerline radius would be a full waiver or not, we asked for that waiver. I think it could be read two ways, but in an abundance of caution, we've requested it as being a waiver, which I think you'll find reasonable. So the changes to the plan are that we were requested by the water department to add a three-gate cluster up in this area and one length of pipe heading to the west. So that's extend water pipe one length past the intersection, cap the end. That gets a mechanical joint with a thrust block. And then the three-gate valve, so that if there ever is an extension of the water main, it's quite easy to do and wouldn't be a hassle to dig up and tap into that main. And then they requested an additional hydrant at the intersection of Fish and Game and Wildlife Circle, so that's shown there. So we will have, there's a hydrant already out here, there'll be one there, and one down at the cul-de-sac. So a nice, safe presentation of hydrants to serve the lots. Also requested was to show the clearing limit. That's the amount of clearing that would be required to just construct the road. So it would be the shoulders, the grading a little bit on the shoulders, and around the drainage and so forth. That totaled about 1.2 acres. We'll likely set, we have to, as some of you may recall, this is an NHESP area for the habitat for an eastern box turtle. They're not endangered or threatened, but they're a species of special concern, so that we do for habitat loss. So we did work with NHESP and provided a good deal of open space in the subdivision to conserve. We've done off-site 2.6 acres, and again, this is just a recap, so you recall, but 2.6 acres off-site and quite a bit on-site. And NHESP approved that plan, subject to, and we could make a note on here if needed on the approval, that a turtle management plan be approved through NHESP. So we're working with a local botanist to produce that, and that needs to be done before we break ground, and will probably be done on or about the first week in April when the turtles wake up. We sweep the area and put a silt fence around and make sure any turtles within that silt fence are removed to the outside. So it'll probably be very close to this line here around the roadway, and we'll make sure all the turtles are safely outside of the work area so they're not impacted by the construction. So those were the changes highlighted, the clearing limit, which I just discussed, the hydrant, the three-gate cluster. And I would note too, we did put in a couple extra deep sump hooded manholes. This is also contingent on the approval of the stormwater permit by the selectmen, and the initial VHB review picked up like a couple extra manholes, so those are shown on the plans as well. So that was the extent of those changes, and those revisions are dated December 27th, 2022. And then to touch, as I alluded to, the waiver, again, we did request a waiver on the no sidewalks due to the rural nature and the fact that, it is a dead-end little path here. So we're going to donate $22,000 towards sidewalks in another area of town where perhaps pedestrian safety is a little bit more applicable. So the other waiver would be per their 11/15/22 review, engineering review. The centerline radius you'll see here, and on the preliminary plan, it's more of an intersection than a corner, but because it's just a driveway heading, we took an 80-foot radius around here, and just basically have the road take a fairly generous turn to the left with a smaller radius than is allowed. It's 80 foot, and then normally you do about 150 for the radius. So that's a waiver from 150 down to 80. And the reason for the waiver is that this section of the roadway does act as an intersection where Fish and Game and Wildlife Circle meet, and the curve at the intersection will act to naturally slow the drivers in the area and perform similar to a regular small uncontrolled intersection that you have in a small subdivision like this. So we think it'll act as more of a traffic calming measure to have a nice center line radius of reduced, and the engineering reviewers did concur that that's an acceptable design for this location. And so to the extent that a waiver is required, it's respectfully requested, and staff thought it'd probably better to ask for the waiver than to have somebody say, well, you didn't ask for a proper waiver. So with your concurrence, we sure would appreciate a vote on that second waiver on the subdivision. But everything else is met, and again, there's an abundance of open space on this, some off-site tracks, as well as all around the perimeter. We submitted, there's a very careful, you're not even allowed to trim brush in those areas. So, of course, where the off-site, there's a power line easement, so there's some brush in there, but it's a nice habitat. There's berries and low bush blueberry and a lot of things that grow under that power line, so it's a nice, valuable habitat. And there's a good amount of area that's outside of it and could remain naturally treed areas. So that would be, I believe, the extent of my presentation tonight. It was basically just to clean up those few little items that had been requested to be changed. And a very important reason to continue is the Board of Health got a chance to review it, full board. We did get in front of them and they approved it, whether it was last week or the week before, but hopefully there's a note in the file. And it's contingent upon 1 bedroom per 10,000 square foot. Was the principal rule they had mentioned on the preliminary plan and on this definitive plan as well. That's an important consideration. So I think that we're in pretty good shape to close the meeting. Hopefully we'll get an affirmative vote. I think you'll find that we met all your rules and regulations and have been very protective of the environment with the extensive vegetation and natural wildlife conservancy areas around the property. But I would certainly be glad to answer any questions if you do have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, would you like to give us a synopsis of your?
I wasn't here for the first hearing. I reviewed the file and have caught up to speed on the project. I have one concern that I didn't really express in the memo or discuss with the project engineer. And that has to do with the 90-degree turn of the road, and it's a safety concern. Is there a street light proposed there? What I'm concerned about is at night somebody's not going to make the turn. Somebody that doesn't see, that the road takes a sharp turn and they're going to go straight. And I'm wondering if is there a street light proposed in that area?
Well, would be happy to put up a few reflectors on the far side. There's trees there. You would hope that they would be obeying the 30 mile an hour, being that no one really comes down Fish and Game from this way except the guys that are going straight anyway. And, they'll have an option there. If they're coming hot, they may be able to bear right and go that way. But it is basically just like a normal intersection. When there's not a lot of traffic, it wouldn't normally warrant a light or a stop sign. It's simply, the rules of the road would allow, if it's unposted, 30 miles per hour maximum, and, responsible drivers would generally follow that. It's a nice level. There's plenty of sight distance. There'll be trees ahead. But again, if I can't imagine you could get up enough speed to get into trouble before you get to that turn, because it's such a short length of road. It's only a few hundred feet, unless you really stomped on it. It shouldn't be an issue. And if you're doing that, then perhaps you deserve to nick a tree. But
That's my only concern. Is that someone might not see well at night and go straight and not make the turn. It could be addressed by some reflectors on trees, by a low wood guardrail with some reflectors. If the boards aren't concerned about it, hopefully there won't be any problems.
I would add, the consulting engineers, VHB, looked at it, and they, similar to the language in my memo, they thought it would more act like a traffic calming measure and would be something that would be approvable and reasonable in that area. You know, so they didn't recommend anything specific in terms of lighting, but certainly there's, you know, very easy to do some marks if it turns out to be warranted, you know. I would think that, you know, with the modern cars with anti-lock brakes and good headlights, as the years go by, it'll be less and less of a concern. It is just a little dead end. If you're going down that road, you're, you know, a pizza delivery to one of these 7 people, and it's an 80-foot radius too, though. It's not a super sharp turn, you know. It's just not a. It's just you know, a little bit steeper than would be normal, but not particularly a 90. You know, it's a little less than 90, and my guess is we'll be just fine. VHP seem to think we'll be just fine, but perhaps just an open condition that the applicant should be responsible for traffic markings if warranted.
Thank you. Members of the board, questions?
Question.
Yeah.
So on the back end of these lots where they back onto the vegetation and wildlife, that's not part of the lot, that's just the end of the lot, correct?
So we're talking about the strip that's along here?
Yep.
Yeah, so that is a part of the lots, but it's designated as a vegetation and wildlife conservancy area.
Are we
And
gonna,
we're gonna demarcate that with raised cement markers all along.
okay, so raised cement markers are included, okay.
Yes, absolutely, and that's clearly noted on the plans and will be a requirement of the turtle management plan as well. And has mentioned that in their letter.
Okay, and then I remember from the last meeting, the neighbors were concerned about the amount of trees coming down related to the noise at the gun club.
Yes, so the good news on that is that's all gun club property there, and we won't have to clear any to the west of the road. And then this work limit line is pretty tight. It's almost 100 feet off of that wetland, so there's a good amount of trees there.
Right here.
But, you know, some trees will come down, but not, in my opinion, a significant amount relative to the distance that range is from the folks across the way.
Okay, my third and final question is the pipe stem, is it the pipe stem or the panhandle driveway into lot 4? What's the opening? Is it 55?
Well, so the width of that panhandle I can scale, but it's gonna be probably about 35 feet, I think is the minimum width. So we probably would have set it at the code minimum.
As the minimum?
Yeah, but I could certainly, the length of the arc is 38 feet, so it's almost certainly 35 feet in a straight line, but I'll see if I can find a scale to check it.
So pipe stem lots are, you know, that you get or driveway, that's how you get an extra lot in. Do we have any code on how they should be? Is the minimum 35?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's either 30 or 35, but we would have looked at that because one of the lots, well, I was just familiar with the regulations, so I would trust that we set that at the right width.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's 35 feet.
35.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. I'll see if I can find some glasses to verify it.
There's, in the center of the cul-de-sac, it says L equals 38.06.
Yeah.
So I think that's feet, 38 feet?
That is feet, and that's measured along an arc that's slightly longer than the full width. So my statement is accurate. It's 35-foot wide panhandle. Yeah, and it's a fairly short panhandle. There are some significant rules, like you can't have 2 panhandles side by side, but this does meet all of the regulations that I could find. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Others? Questions?
Yeah, this is Dave. Do you have is there a central planning area in the cul-de-sac, or is it all open?
So we proposed a planting area with a hydrant in it in the middle, so a little green space.
Thank you.
Other questions of the board? We don't have anybody here, so is there anybody remotely that would care to comment or ask questions? Hearing none, assuming there are none, sounds like we're ready for a motion.
So I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? And let's do a roll call vote. Dave?
Aye.
Ann?
Aye.
Emily Brady, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
And Craig Chadwick, aye.
And
Oh, I'm sorry, Harry.
I was told I don't vote, but I can.
okay.
Okay.
That would be an aye.
Okay. Unanimous. Meeting is closed.
Need to check with him. You
So
can
I
vote.
would move that we make the following findings of fact for case number 2022-23 Wildlife Circle subdivision. One, that the applicants Christopher W. Auer, Mark Giarusso, Janet S. Auer, Brian Blanchard, and Scott O. Auer have submitted a definitive subdivision plan to subdivide their property off of Littlefield Pond Road in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 81, Section 41S, and the Harwich Code, Chapter 400, Article 2. Subdivision will create 7 single-family residential building lots. 2, the applicants own 6 vacant parcels located at 0 Littlefield Pond Road, 11 Littlefield Pond Road, 105 Old Harwich Brewster Road, and 103 Old Harwich Brewster Road. The parcels are shown on the assessor's maps as map 27 parcels C20-11 Littlefield Pond Road, and include map 27 parcel C22, 0 Littlefield Pond Road, a portion of map 77 parcel C23, 0 Littlefield Pond Road, map 65 parcel R2, 103 Old Brewster Road, and map 65 parcel R3, 105 Brewster Road. 3, the total area of the parcels listed above in the subdivision is 9.03 acres. 4, the properties are located off Littlefield Pond Road and Fish and Game Drive in northwest Harwich in the Rural Residential Zoning District and Drinking Water Resource Protection District. 5, the applicant has applied for a definitive subdivision plan approval for the proposed subdivision, including the creation of a new panhandle lot under Chapter 400, Article 2 of the Code of the Town of Harwich, Harwich Subdivision Rules and Regulations, and the State Subdivision Control Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Sections 81K through 81GG. The term subdivision work used herein shall refer to construction work on all common development infrastructure such as, without limitation, roadwork and drainage facilities. 6, the application narrative and the proposed street names were received by the town clerk on September 20th, 2022. The application package included quitclaim deed for a parcel of vacant land located in Harwich, Barnstable County, Mass., shown on a plan of land in Harwich, Mass., prepared for Bernard F. Taylor, scale 1 inch equals 40 feet, date October 20th, 2005, Down Cape Engineering, Inc., Civil Engineers, Land Surveyors, 959 Main Street, Yarmouthport, Mass. 02675. Said plan is recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds in Plan Book 603, page 98. Quitclaim deed for property address Wood Lot in North Harwich with no frontage of any known street, Book 31689, page 91, along with a Harwich Municipal Lien Certificate dated 8/5/2022. Quitclaim deed for the land situated in Harwich Lot 6A is shown on a plan of Belmont Estates filed with Barnstable County Registry of Deeds in Plan Book 637, page 93 to 96, along with a Harwich Municipal Lien Certificate dated August 5th, 2022. Quitclaim deed for property address 103 Old Harwich Brewster Road, Book 30127, page 311, along with a Harwich Municipal Lien Certificate dated August 5th, 2022. Quitclaim deed for property address 105 Old Harwich Brewster Road, Book 30127, page 308, along with a Harwich Municipal Lien Certificate dated August 5th, 2022. A plan dated January 26th, 22, with a revision date of 12/27/22, entitled Definitive Subdivision Plan of Land off Littlefield Pond Road, prepared by Dan Ojala, P.E. of Down Cape Engineering. An accompanying plan dated 1/26/22, entitled Roadway Profile to accompany definitive subdivision plan of land off Littlefield Pond Road, prepared by Dan Ojala, P.E., Down Cape Engineering.
Revised December 27th, 2022. Can we sneak that in there, or is that going to be
And
coming up?
Further, okay. And further revised,
December 27th was the latest on the
December
profile.
27th, 2022. Drainage calculation dated September 16th, 2022, prepared by Down Cape Engineering, Inc., including A, drainage infiltration models, B, stormwater operations and maintenance plan, C, emergency spill contingency plan, D, estimated operations and maintenance budget, E, construction period pollution and erosion and sedimentation control plan, F, schedule of inspection and maintenance of stormwater management system, and G, overview of stormwater management system narrative indicating stormwater standards compliance. 7, the applicant has previously submitted a preliminary subdivision plan, case PB 2019-25. The planning board approved the preliminary plan and issued a written decision on 7/30/2019. 8, after the preliminary plan was approved, the applicant submitted an A&R plan to divide off conservation parcels. These parcels were mapped for rare wildlife, and an application was submitted to the Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. 9, wildlife habitat easements and a deed restriction are required for the subdivision by NHESP. Applicant included a draft of those protective covenants and easements along with the application. 10, the proposed panhandle lot meets the requirements of the bylaw, Chapter 325-18L. The lot shows a shape number of 16.4. 11, the subject properties are not located in a flood hazard zone. 12, there are no wetland resource areas on the properties. 13, the subject properties are A, located in a Zone 2 Drinking Water Resource Protection District, and B, located in an area mapped by the Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program under the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act as priority habitat for the eastern box turtles. 14, the lots are restricted to 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet per lot and must abide by all Board of Health requirements for septic system installation.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I make a motion that we accept.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Dave?
David Harris, aye.
And Clark Tucker, aye.
Emily Brady, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
And Craig Chadwick, aye.
I'm restricted.
Okay.
So I move that we vote to grant the following waivers of strict compliance with subdivision rules and regulations for sidewalks, Section 400-14M7, and roadway horizontal curves, Section 400-12A.2, Appendix 2, Table 1. And for clarification, those requested waivers are: 1, with respect to sidewalks, the applicant has requested a waiver of strict compliance with the subdivision rules and regulations, Section 400-14.M.7, requesting to waive the requirement to build a sidewalk. In lieu of the building of the sidewalk, the applicant will make a donation to the sidewalk fund in the amount of $22,000. And 2, the roadway horizontal curve. The proposed road has a sharp horizontal curve at station 3+08.99. The curve in the road has a centerline radius of approximately 80 feet, which is below the minimum of 150 feet for ways and minor roadways. The applicant has requested waiver of strict compliance from Section 400-12.A.2, Appendix 2, Table 1.
And we have different draft motions. Do we have to vote on each one individually? Okay.
Well, that's how I've done them, so
Pardon me?
that's how I'm doing them, so did the motion on the waivers.
Okay, so we have a motion. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Give me a roll call.
Oh, yeah. I didn't hear who seconded. Oh, Bill,
Bill.
okay, sorry. Dave?
David Harris, aye.
Ann Clark Tucker, aye.
Emily Birdie, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
And Craig Chadwick, I'm an aye.
All right, so I move that the board vote to approve the definitive subdivision plan of land off Littlefield Pond Road prepared for RB Hour Company et al., dated January 26, 2022, with the most recent revision date of December 27th, 2022, prepared by Down Cape Engineering, Inc., Yarmouthport, Mass. Planning Board approval is subject to the following conditions of approval. One, prior to planning board endorsement of the definitive subdivision plan, the applicant shall enter into a standard covenant with the planning board to serve as a performance bond to ensure completion of the subdivision infrastructure improvements shown on the definitive subdivision plan. The covenant will run with the land. Two, prior to the start of construction, the subdivision certificate of action shall be recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds together with the approved definitive subdivision planning and covenant. Proof of recording of the aforementioned documents shall be provided to the planning and building departments. Also prior to the start of construction. Three, the applicant shall make a contribution to the sidewalk fund in the amount of $22,000 in lieu of constructing a sidewalk along the proposed road. Again, prior to the start of construction. Four, the applicant shall submit a stormwater management plan to the Board of Selectmen or its designee and shall obtain a stormwater management permit under the town's stormwater and illicit discharge regulations. And again, prior to the start of construction. Five, the applicant shall submit an eastern box turtle protection plan to the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, as stated in their letter dated August 31st, 2021. Further general conditions. Number 6, the owner shall maintain the construction site free of trash and debris. Dust control measures shall be implemented as needed. 7, during construction, the contractor shall comply with the Code of Harwich, Chapter 189, noise provisions. Number 8, the septic disposal system will require review and approval from the Board of Health. The Board of Health has determined that the lots are restricted to 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet. In addition, they require new homes in the subdivision to be served by the town's public water supply system. 9, the applicant shall comply with the development restrictions issued by the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program of the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife in their letter dated August 31st, 2021. 10, in accordance with the permit issued by NHESP, there shall be no buildings erected or land disturbance within the areas denoted as, quote, natural areas on lots 2, 3, 4, and 5. 11, any site work within 100 feet of any wetland resource areas will require review and approval of the Conservation Commission. 12, no individual lot or lots shall be conveyed or built upon until released from the covenant. 13, the owners shall comply with the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 400-15, inspections during construction. And 14, the applicant shall be responsible for installing traffic markings as needed, including at and near the 80-foot pavement centerline radius, which is the subject of the approved waiver. Is that language sufficient?
That should do it.
We have a motion, I have a second.
Motion.
A second, all those in favor, Dave?
David Harris, aye.
Ann Clark Tucker, aye.
Emily Birdie, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Craig Chadwick and I. So we are all set.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I think we got to follow it with the clerk, and then there's an appeal period that runs, and I can endorse the Mylar. I really appreciate your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda. is a discussion, annual town meeting zoning bylaw amendments, Paul Alkiotis. All right, Director of Planning and Community Development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, the May annual town meeting is approaching, and this is the time of year that the planning board and the planner and the Board of Selectmen discuss any needed amendments to the zoning bylaw. I've received some correspondence from the Assistant Town Administrator, from selectmen asking to have some issues addressed this year at the annual town meeting. I attended the selectmen's meeting last night and presented this memo to them and discussed this with them. The bylaw amendments that we discussed were floodplain zoning. As most of you know, the National Flood Insurance Program requires member communities to have a section of their zoning bylaw that regulates development in floodplain areas that are shown on the flood insurance rate maps. A couple years ago, they asked to have their member communities make some changes to the floodplain bylaws, and we are a little bit tardy in getting those changes approved by town meeting. I had a meeting with Shannon Hulst, the floodplain manager from the Cape Extension Service, and she had actually provided us with a draft of the amendments that FEMA's looking to see the town approve at town meeting. So I have a working draft with recommendations from her on what FEMA wants to see, and the most important reason why we need to get this approved is that if we don't, the National Flood Insurance Program may take us off their list of member communities, and that would mean that anybody within the flood zone that has flood insurance wouldn't qualify for the National Flood Insurance Program anymore, and they'd have to go out to the marketplace to get flood insurance for their buildings, and that would be substantially more expensive than the National Flood Insurance Program subsidized flood insurance. So this is something that I think we need to move forward with, and at last night's selectmen meeting, the selectmen agreed, and they gave the green light to move forward with that amendment. I told the Board of Selectmen that we'd be meeting tonight with the Planning Board to discuss this, and that's what we're here to do. So I'm looking for a nod from the Planning Board to direct me to move forward with drafting that amendment, posting a public hearing, and scheduling it to be on the warrant for a vote at the May annual town meeting.
That's a tight time frame, though, correct?
Yeah, the selectmen had some other things that they wanted me to work on related to affordable housing, and I took this and the solar energy bylaw amendment, that I thought we could get this done within the time frame, but that we really couldn't get involved with researching and drafting any affordable housing related zoning amendments. So that's the floodplain zoning. The second one was a request from the selectmen to take a look at the zoning's regulations for solar energy generating facilities. I reviewed the town's bylaw and found that it only seems to address or regulate large solar installations of 250 kilowatts or larger. Back, 10 or 15 years ago, I worked on a bylaw for the town of Marshfield, and when I started to work on it, I tried to envision what different types of solar installations there are out there. And I came up with 3 categories, with residential, commercial, and then commercial power generating to sell back to the grid. With respect to residential installations, we all know that people put solar panels on their house to save in their energy costs. The bylaw doesn't regulate that. Folks also can install ground-mounted solar arrays, And those are not regulated. And I think it's important to look at the context of the neighborhood and where on the property somebody wants to install a solar array. Having it on the front lawn might not be a good fit for the neighborhood. And so we can take a look at regulations that will help to screen them or make them so that they're not so obtrusive to their neighbors. Moving to the commercial scale solar, obviously commercial buildings would want to install them on their roof. We've also seen recently these canopies that are being installed over commercial parking lots that have solar panels on the roof. That's a great way to generate solar power to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and the cars that are parked under there are out of the weather and out of the sun and the rain and the snow. So those have become popular, and we've all seen them at different places. We need to have some zoning in place that regulates them and indicates what's allowed and what's not allowed. And then the third category is the large solar farms that are specifically to generate energy to sell back to the grid. The town does have regulations for that, but we'll review those regulations. And so what I'm proposing is to draft a bylaw amendment that will cover those three areas. Accidentally, I was clearing off my desk last night, and I opened a file, and there was the City of Beverly solar regulations, and it covered all of those areas that I remember when I wrote the bylaw I wrote. So we have a good start there, and I'm gonna go back and take a look at what I put in place in Marshfield, talk to the planner there, see if it's been used, if there's been any problems with it. So I have a working draft of that along with the one from the flood zone. So this is one of the reasons why I'm saying I think we can pull this all together in time for a public hearing in about a month. The last issue that I discussed was affordable housing. And I understand that all of Eastern Massachusetts is struggling with the housing crisis, and that it's a complex problem that really is never going to get solved, but we can do what we can to manage the problem and produce more affordable housing. There are zoning provisions for inclusionary housing that require, as part of any development application, or certain development applications of a certain size, that they would have to provide affordable units after they hit a certain triggering threshold. For example, if there was a 12 lot subdivision, we could draft a bylaw that says for 10 or more house lots in the subdivision, the developer needs to provide 2 affordable lots. Or if it's for multifamily housing, after a certain number of multifamily apartment units, they have to provide X percentage or amount of affordable units. That's one of the measures that many communities have adopted. When I was discussing this at the selectmen's meeting last night, I was advised that the town attempted to get an inclusionary zoning bylaw amendment approved back in the 90s, and it was not passed by the residents. So I think that's something that we need to take another look at. There are other types of affordable housing programs that are being tried in other parts of the country, in resort communities. And as I understand it, a number of the planners across the Cape are also working on various measures to try to improve affordable housing. These are all things that are fairly complex, that are going to require some time and some research. And when I go forward with the zoning amendment, I only do so when I'm confident that we'll get it passed. As most of you know, most zoning amendments require a 2/3 vote at town meeting, so that bar is a little bit higher for us to get the required number of votes. So at this point in time, I asked the selectmen if we could hold off on that. The chairman indicated that there may be some tweaking needed of the accessory dwelling unit regulations in the zoning bylaw now. And more specifically, he indicated that the minimum lot size requirements to be able to do an accessory dwelling unit may be a limiting factor for people that wouldn't allow them to go forward. They may want to do an accessory dwelling unit, but if the bylaw says you need 40,000 square feet, and their lot isn't 40,000 square feet, they're not eligible. So the chairman asked me if I could take a look at that, and I said, well, if it's just making an adjustment to a number and it's not going to require a lot of research, yeah, that's something that I thought we could take care of as well. Based on that discussion last night, the Board of Selectmen unanimously voted to ask me to go forward with drafting these amendments. I've taken a look at the calendar, and I'm going to need to recheck it to count the days, but I think that we could schedule a public hearing on the 28th of February that would meet the requirements for advertising, and then there would be some additional time, another week or so if we had to continue a hearing. But what our goal is, as you know, is to get the public hearings completed, get the final versions of these articles done prior to the warrant going to press, so that we don't have to stand up at town meeting and try to explain to people the intricacies of some minor amendment on the floor of town meeting. So that was what I wanted to do tonight, was to have this discussion with the board. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? Mary?
So I guess I have more comments than I have questions. One, I think, the floodplain zoning is, something that's kind of a no-brainer that we have to do. It's, I actually thought we had done it not that long ago, but perhaps it was longer ago than I thought. My only concern, I guess, with the solar power is that I know the large-scale ground-mounted photovoltaic was done specifically as a part of the Green Cities
Green communities.
program, right, the Green
Yeah.
Communities program. So, as I recall, that was specifically done just for that, and that was what we had focused on when we approved it. So I guess my last question is, are you expecting that this February 28th public hearing is the final public hearing? Or is that your public hearing to then have us recommend it to selectmen, for the selectmen to then come back and have us do a final public hearing on the zoning?
Hopefully, these aren't going to generate a lot of discussion. It'd be very controversial, and so it would be my hope. Usually, there's not a lot of people that come to public hearings unless there's something controversial in the article. So I would anticipate that we'll just need to have one public hearing, but we still have time if we need to continue the hearing to a second hearing.
Okay.
And we'll, once we have these articles in draft form, we'll share them with the Board of Selectmen. We'll send them around to some town departments and the planning board and solicit some feedback in advance of that hearing.
So will you be able to get drafts to us for the next meeting, so that we'll have a week to review before you publish? Because that's where my questions come in.
Yep. I think I could commit to at least getting one of them done within the next 2 weeks. And I can send you, I can send the board members materials just through email, but as you know, because of the open meeting law, you can't have a discussion amongst yourself. So I can distribute them to you as soon as I have them in draft form.
Well, our past practice, and Bill, I'm gonna turn to you to correct me if I'm wrong, we've typically done a draft ordinance, a draft bylaw, sent it to the selectmen, had the selectmen refer it back to us for a final public hearing once it was in final form. So, so that's where I'm coming from on the question on the public hearing, because that way we know we've advertised it in final form and we're not changing something after it's been finally
Well,
advertised.
the purpose of a public hearing is to take public comment, so it's not in final form until after the hearing and the board votes on it and votes a recommendation. So we are tight on time here, and this is why I wrote this memo and wanted to have this discussion with the selectmen and the planning board, saying, we can try to get a couple of these things done, and I think it's all doable.
Okay.
But the time frame will be fairly tight because we started a little bit late. Normally, we would start this conversation in November or December and be a little further ahead, but I started on December 12th, so we're running.
Yeah, no, that wasn't gonna happen this year.
Yeah, but we wanted to see if we could get some things done.
Sounds good.
Other
That's
questions?
all I had.
I do.
Bill?
Some of that stuff can be handled through lot coverage, as far as the solar panels, accessory buildings. we could use the zoning part of the law for lot coverage
Yep.
to
there-
get away from that 40,000 acre.
Yeah, there's another approach that the bylaws that I've written most recently towards the end would have a kind of a flexibility provision where the planning board would have some discretion on a case-by-case basis. And so I'm gonna look at that as an option. We'll look at lowering those lot area requirements, or as you suggested, maybe handling it through lot coverage.
Yeah, and a lot of the existing buildings that are on smaller lots can be used for accessory, if they're existing.
Yeah, it would be instructive to have an understanding of what the average lot size is in town. And if we're saying you have to have 40,000 square feet, but the average lot size is 25 or 30,000, then you know why it's not working.
For all the new zoning, it's 40, so that's that. And I think we had something in our zoning about a new subdivision, if it was 10 lots, say, would have to use 2 lots for housing. I think that's someplace in our zoning.
I'll take a look. When I mentioned it, Selectman Howell said, yeah, I was on the planning board back in the 90s, and he said that it didn't go well at town meeting.
It didn't, I don't know if we brought it up. I thought we had it, because we had a subdivision that was going in, and they used it. And they could take, if they didn't want to put 2 of the lots in the new subdivision under housing, they could buy 2 separate lots and donate it in
Yeah.
place, so.
Yeah, some of those have these buyout provisions where they could write a check or donate land or a unit somewhere else. So all that's something that we'll look at, but that's gonna be a bigger project to focus on the affordable housing.
And we have talked in the past year, I think it's been, about looking at a lot of changes on the lot coverage and what things are considered lot coverage, like a sidewalk going to the front door. Some of that stuff is in there and it should be removed, I think.
Whether a gravel driveway was considered
Right, the gravel
lot.
compared to asphalt driveways. A lot of things that are in there that seem to be overboard.
The lot coverage is a little bit restrictive.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, and it gets into a gray area when we're talking about shell driveways or crushed stone that are in effect permeable, but
Right.
might get swept into the lot coverage, so we could take a look at that at some point.
And at one time, we allowed patios without having to have a building permit, because it wasn't considered a structure unless it was raised above the ground, above 30 inches, I think. And then that changed again. They started counting those as lot coverage, which is, to my opinion, it's actually landscaping. So,
If the water can slide through the spaces in between the boards, then it's pervious.
yeah. So, something to look at.
Okay.
That came up on an application that we had probably within the last 6 months,
Yep.
right? I would
Yeah,
say.
He had to eliminate some of his parking lot to be able to put his pool in. And
Yes.
It wasn't fair.
It was the driveway.
Yeah.
Right.
Driveway with a turnaround parking area, which he had to get rid of. Then he ended up backing out on the road.
And am I crazy? Didn't we see an application that had solar panels over a parking
Yeah,
structure?
Queen Anne Road, the storage unit.
Right.
Thank you,
It's
that's what I
under
thought.
construction right now. as a
That's what
matter
I
of
thought,
But
Yeah.
that falls under lot coverage.
right. Just circling back to your point on the solar, we did see one that was solar panels over a parking garage.
And I know
Over
people
parking
have
lot.
them on the roofs of their homes, so I don't know whether they were allowed under zoning or not, but
Haven't either.
they weren't, when I did a word search for solar, I wasn't seeing anything that regulated that. So it'll be a good idea to codify that in the zoning regulations,
That may come under building department rules.
building code, yeah.
Yeah, I wondered about that. If there are no, if I understood your memo, there are currently no zoning regulations for residential for house-mounted, if that's the right word, solar panels. So who ultimately is responsible? The building inspector for the installation and construction and all that of the panels? Yes? Okay.
Yeah, we also need to understand that the state protects this use to some extent, so towns can't prohibit them, and that's not what I'd be advocating for. I think solar is an important component of what every community should be doing to try to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels. So just getting these things in the bylaw makes the rules clear to everybody, and we can also take steps to make sure that they aren't put up in locations that are inappropriate for the neighborhood setting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of Paul or comments on the?
I have one procedural question. Is there a requirement for public comment outside the hearing? Or does the hearing cover the requirement for public comment?
So anybody can send the planning board a letter or an email, and we would read that or note it at the public hearing. So people don't have to physically be here at the meeting or attend the hearing remotely. If they've, they can submit comments on their own.
But you don't have to publish the proposed changes and allow a certain amount of time for public comment on those, on wherever they appear, if they're on the website or?
Technically, no, but the way the state law works, it does kind of work that way. So I'll write a public hearing notice that'll say that on February 28th, the planning board's going to hold a public hearing to consider amending a certain section of the zoning bylaw that regulates floodplains or solar installations, and that folks can pick up copies of the draft language at Town Hall. We will put them on our webpage so that people can see that. And the state law requires that the public hearing notice run for 2 consecutive weeks in a local newspaper, and then a 3rd week has to go by before the hearing date. So from that first publication date, that does give people that are interested in this a few weeks with which to review what we're proposing and to prepare comments to the planning board on what we're trying to change in the bylaw.
Okay, thanks.
David, you had a question? David Harris? Did you have a question or a comment?
We can't hear you, David.
Can't hear you.
Are you muted?
Oh, boy. Can you hear us? Not if you can hear us. You can hear us. We cannot hear you. You must be muted.
Did your cell phone drop, David? I can't read the typing.
I can't read it either.
I don't.
What was that, an X? Saying forget it?
I think that's what it was.
David, I think it's *6 on your phone, is I think what it says. *6 on your phone should unmute you.
Yeah, how I got muted, I don't know. Can you hear me now?
We
Yes.
can hear you.
Did you
Yeah,
have,
my question is to Paul, is there or are there any regulations governing electric vehicle charging stations in commercial lots that, because this is an emerging issue and it's going to be cropping up everywhere. I just wondered if the state or the town needs to address that.
Thank you for that question. It's a good question. It's my understanding that the state, I think the state building code now has some requirements for electric charging stations per X number of parking spaces. Having said that, I think it would be a good idea for the town to add something to the parking requirements that says if you have a parking lot, if you're building a new parking lot or altering an existing parking lot of 20 or more spaces, then you shall supply electric charging station of a certain type for a ratio between the number of spaces and charging stations. A lot of communities are doing that now, and a lot of communities are also installing charging stations at municipal parking lots and at municipal buildings. And I think there are some grant programs out there available for getting money to put them in at municipal parking lots. So that's something that we can look at in the future to put that in the bylaw, and I think that would be helpful to a lot of folks that are trying to transition over to electric vehicles.
Thank you.
Questions or comments from anybody else on the board? Thank you, Paul. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the January 10th,
No, I
2020.
scratched that, sorry.
I don't have them
I was
in.
gonna say, because I didn't see them,
Sorry.
so. Okay. Anything else for the good of the board?
So I will just say that with respect to Community Preservation Committee, we are meeting on February 9th, and that's when we expect to start voting on the motions and the applications.
And you have more requests than you have money?
We're still finalizing how much money is available, but it is a very heavy requests this year, so I'm not sure whether we'd be able to fund everything if we wanted to. But we're still working through numbers, which is why we're meeting on the 9th to do our motions.
Good. Anything else for the good of the board? Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
And Clark Tucker, aye.
Emily Brady, aye.
Mary Maslowski, aye.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Craig Chadwick, I'm an aye. And we are adjourned.